Thank you for this opportunity.
All for being here. The question that we are asked tonight about did the public win or lose? Well, in ethics reform during this past legislative session, there was a winner and there was a loser. The loser were the legislators the winner are the legislators who would like to continue to get large gifts from lobbyists, because unfortunately, Georgia remains one of only 3 states in the nation that has no limit on lobbyist gifts to legislators. The losers were the public, us, regular folks who just want to get their voice out there, to communicate to their legislators, to have them vote on our ideas instead of those being pushed hard by lobbyists and others with special interests. Thank you again for joining us tonight. And I just want to kind of describe quickly the job that I have, because so often people ask me, what do you do? What does Common Cause do? And I think it was best summed up the other day when I was walking down the street and a guy recognized me and he said, "Hey, you're that try to get government to do right guy, aren't you?" I don't think there's any better way to sum it up, that yes, Common Cause is an organization that tries to get government and politicians to do right. Our slogan is holding power accountable. We've been doing that here in Georgia since 1974, and we'll continue to keep pushing that way. During this last legislative session, it was no fault of media coverage, and particularly opinion columnists, that this reform effort did not happen. There was plenty of coverage of a lot of our events, and the 2 gentlemen that joined us tonight completely covered the issue very well and really carried it forward and brought it to a level of public attention that it could not have happened without us. And the interesting thing about it is that we've got a columnist from the left side of the political spectrum and one from the right side of the political spectrum. Usually when you have people on different ends of the spectrum, you have a debate, you have a disagreement. But these 2 gentlemen vehemently agree on the need for ethics reform, and they covered it in their columns. So I first want to introduce them to you all, starting with, always on your left, Jay Bookman with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Jay became an Atlanta resident with us and joined the AJC in 1990. Since that time, he's won 2 national awards for outstanding editorial writing. He's won several awards for his work on environmental issues, and he's the 8-time winner of the Best of Cox Newspaper Awards for columns and editorials. He is also the author of a book, Caught in the Current, published by St. Martin's Press. It's about the social impact of technology. So everybody rush out tonight and make sure you look that up on Amazon and purchase that book. And he has not just a degree, but 2 degrees, one in history and one in journalism from Pennsylvania State University. So again, if you'll help me welcome tonight Jay Bookman. And staunchly always on your right, Kyle Wingfield. Kyle joined the AJC in 2009, filling some very big shoes of longtime conservative columnist Jim Wooten there with the AJC. And Kyle has not only filled the shoes, but he's busted out of them and really hit the ground running and is doing a terrific job at the AJC. Prior to joining them and moving back home, he spent 4.5 years as an editorial page writer for the Wall Street Journal, based in Brussels, Belgium. So I know you all feel real sorry for him right at this point, right? But prior to Belgium, he is a Georgia native, hailing from Dalton, Georgia. And so for that, we must say, go Catamounts. A lot of big Catamount fans out there. Dalton High School. He's a 2001 UGA graduate with a degree in journalism, and actually won the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communications. Was a recipient of the college's John Drury Young Alumnus Award. And so please welcome my fellow dog, Kyle Wingfield. Well, we're going to let the battle stories begin. So we're going to start from the left and go with Mr. Bookman for opening remarks.
Thank you. The question was asked, who won in the ethics battle of 2012? And I'd like to disagree with you. I think the public won. The public won because the issue was put on the table. And it will only disappear if we let it disappear. I was heartened this week when I got a phone call out of the blue from somebody in Dalton, where Hal's from, an older man who told me that he's a conservative Republican. He was getting together with his prayer group in church. They started talking about ethics reform. And they decided that that was something that was important to Georgia and important to their community and ought to happen. And he was calling to ask, how could he help make that happen? How could his prayer group help make that happen? What could they do? Among other things, I refer them to Common Cause. I also mentioned that Common Cause has been in an alliance with the Tea Party on this issue. Again, right and left coming together to decide this is something that ought to happen in Georgia, something that needs to happen in Georgia. The legislators did not win. They went into a stall. Those who remember North Carolina basketball, the four corners offense, that's what they did. They were just passing the ball around. They were afraid to allow a public meeting. They were afraid to hold a hearing on ethics legislation because they knew the public would respond to it. So they went into hiding. They held the ball. They're scared of it. They know it's not going to go away and that it's a matter of time. And how much time it's going to take will depend on a gentleman from Dalton and the members of his prayer group. He told me he was going to be contacting other churches with whom he has contact in other legislative districts. I mentioned your Common Cause and the Tea Party are sponsoring a program, which we'll get into later, about urging candidates for office to sign a pledge promising that if elected, they would support ethics reform in Georgia. We're getting signatures already. I mentioned that to him. He was very excited to hear that. He's going to go talk to his legislators. He's going to urge other people to talk. So I think momentum is building, and it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time.
And I will begin by saying that whatever had happened this session, there might have been temporary winners or losers, but this is the kind of struggle or effort that has to go on year after year after year. It's a matter of good governance, and I think that's why it does attract people from across the political spectrum. If I could speak from my end just briefly, if you believe as a conservative in small, limited government, then you don't want to have undue influence from lobbyists for whatever cause, getting the legislature to do things that it might not otherwise have done, to exercise power that it might not have exercised, or to hand out corporate subsidies or that sort of thing that might not need to go out. Pro-business is not necessarily the same thing as pro-market. And so when I look at something like the tax reform package, the so-called tax reform package that came out this year, you can see the impact of the people who have influence on the legislators and the ones who don't. You don't see in the lobbying reports the voices of taxpayers or the people who served on a special counsel to suggest possible tax reforms. You do see the voices of the companies and groups that got what they wanted and have been trying to get for some time. But again, this is an issue that goes across the spectrum, and the AJC had an opinion poll earlier this year before the session showing that the idea of ethics reform, and specifically a cap on gifts, has strong support among Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. One of the reasons that I think the Tea Party has latched onto this issue is because the Tea Party, like a lot of other groups, is very attuned to the idea of the gap between the citizens and their elected officials. And certainly the issue of lobbyist gifts speaks to that gap. If you spend time talking at length with lobbyists, in my experience, very many of them will tell you that whereas they often get portrayed as the bad guys in this, there's a real sense of entitlement among legislators for these sorts of gifts, for these dinners, for these sporting event tickets, for these concert tickets, for these junkets that the lobbying groups or corporations pay for. That was to the tune of more than $800,000 during the first 3 months of 2012 while the legislature was in session. One of the things that we get pushback on when we write about these sorts of things and talk about them is the idea that if we were to limit these gifts or go farther and ban them, that this activity would just go underground. And frankly, I find that insulting both to citizens and to the legislators themselves. To the citizens, because every year these legislators come to Atlanta and they pass a number of laws that they expect all of us as citizens to follow. And yes, they're not naive. They don't expect 100% adherence by 100% of the population, but they pass the laws anyway, and often with good reason. So it's rather insulting as citizens to hear that, that's good enough for us, but not for the legislators themselves. And speaking of themselves, it is insulting to the lawmakers, I think. These are lawmakers. You would think that the idea that they and the people that they associate with at the Gold Dome would just break these rules if they were passed, these laws if they were passed. Again, that's insulting, and it's insulting to them and their own sense of integrity, I would think. And to many of the legislators, to be fair to them, they do find it insulting, and they do think that, that this kind of idea's time has come. Hopefully there will be a way forward next year. There's a possibility of a committee appointed by the Lieutenant Governor to study measures that other states have taken, and so hopefully we'll see something coming as this effort continues.
I think it's important what Kyle just said. There's an untapped well of legislative support, I think, for these kind of proposals. Again, that's part of the reason that the leadership wouldn't allow in either the House or the Senate a single hearing on the legislation. Some legislators are ready, even eager to support this, but they're being intimidated into silence by their leadership. In part because leadership finds control of lobbyist gifts a useful mechanism to discipline the backbenchers. If you cross the speaker or cross a powerful state senator, all of a sudden you're not getting the lobbyist gifts anymore. You're off the list. So it's used as a disciplinary tool by leadership as well.
And you may have heard of the 80-20 principle, where 20% of the people do 80% of the work, or 20% of your customers provide 80% of your business. Well, there's something close to that at play with these gifts too, and I don't think it breaks down exactly 80% of the gifts going to 20% of the legislators, because you will be surprised if you go through these reports how many of the backbenchers are receiving dinners and sporting tickets and that sort of thing too. However, it is true, I've found over time, that 80% of the lobbyist spending does happen on 20% of the incidents. A handful, relative handful of the gifts that we talk about account for the bulk of the spending. And so the idea that lobbyists won't be able to get their message across to legislators, and I believe they're fully entitled to try to get their message across to legislators, the idea that they won't be able to do that if there's a cap on gifts, frankly, doesn't ring true, because most of the time they're not spending that kind of money anyway.